Hello, welcome to this. This is going to be a sort of a crash course for shipbuilding for Homeworld Remastered using Blender and the Homeworld Remastered toolkit for Blender. That is, which was created by myself and partially based on an existing Collada Exporter, and also with a lot of contribution by Dominic Cassidy, who is Dragon93 on the Gearbox forums, he contributed all the sort of joint tools stuff, which I'll get into in a second. So, but I'm going to go. Part of this is going to be a little bit crash coursey for Blender itself, because if you're unfamiliar with Blender 3D modeling, then I'll just go into it. So, you start out, grab Blender. I'll put links in the description, but Blender's easy enough. It's just blender.org. Grab 273A is the most recent full stable release. Blender 274 has got release candidates. I haven't messed with 274 yet. It's got some stuff that's not really going to impact shipbuilding or anything. But yeah, 273 and 273A have some handy paint tools that make painting better. And then you're going to want to grab the Homeworld Remastered Toolkit for Blender off of GitHub, and this will also be in the link because that's kind of a longer link. You just download the zip here. I'm just going to show you what's in it. And inside the zip it says Better Collada Exporter, because that's how this whole started out, was with the Collada Exporter. And there will be the add-ons folder in there. You just copy that Homeworld Toolkit folder to your scripts add-ons folder. Just copy that folder into there, and then fire up Blender itself, and then in user preferences, just do a quick search for under the add-ons tab, because you got all these other stuff. Just search for Homeworld or HOM, and it'll pop up Homeworld Remastered Toolkit, and you click that checkbox to turn it on, save user settings, and you're pretty much good to go from there. So, actually controlling Blender, if you have used 3D packages other than Blender, Blender's got a couple of quirks. Selection is with right click, rotation is middle mouse, click and drag middle mouse, panning is holding shift and then click and drag middle mouse button, zoom is mouse wheel, which is easy enough to remember, or you can control and middle mouse click to zoom in and out. This is pretty much the default view for Blender. You have the 3D view here. You have the outliner on here, which basically has all of your object hierarchy and everything. And here, this over here is the scene properties, or the properties panel, which has stuff like rendering you don't have to worry about, but things like world lighting you kind of do, and textures, which will come into play a little bit later. So, I'm going to get started. I modeled this crappy little ship took me about an hour. Well, not an hour. It took me like 20 minutes to throw together, but just as an example of a ship to use. So we start out, tab. Select it. When you select it, a mesh object, you can do tab to go. Tab goes from object mode to edit mode, and so edit mode is where you do your actual editing. So if you select all of your faces, and I'm going to open up down in the corners of each of the individual windows, they're like in the lower left and upper right corner, you see there's like the three little lines, and if you move the mouse over them and it turns into that plus symbol, then you can click and drag to open up another window. And you could have like 8 3D windows if you wanted to, and have them each on different views, different angles. But then you can also, that is my start button, I don't want the start button. You click on that, and that gives me the UV image editor. And I accidentally hit a render button, so it thinks that I'm rendered. Not that untitled. Hello, heck. Why is that all white? That's annoying. Yeah. Oh, okay, this is because I'd already done some UVs and then I deleted the UVs because I'm dumb. Okay, so then with all of your faces selected, you can press U, or press U on the keyboard, and that brings up the UV mapping panel, and that gives you a bunch of different stuff. You can do a standard unwrap, and you can see that that looks really weird because I have my mesh is completely, it's all connected. I'm forgetting the word for that. It's a manifold mesh, so unwrap gets some slightly odd results. If you want to do like super customized, you can like a really heavily customized unwrap, you can select your edges with, you can select vertex, edge select, face select. So you can select edges and Control E and mark seam, and then select everything and hit unwrap, and then it actually seams it out. Or a clear seam. What you can do is you can hit unwrap and just do a smart UV project, and what this does is it breaks apart the UVs based on angles that you set in here. I'm going to up the island margin a little, like to 0.2 will do, I think. And bang, that gives you much better UVs that are a bit more workable. And this is going to be, I'm going to go into making the UVs and doing UVs and actually setting up materials so that you can have badges as well. And this is just that, and then just doing a straight replace with the Kushan Scout for the ship type, because actually creating a 100% new ship is, I don't actually know how to do yet. So we do UV map, and this is diffuse UV. And then if you just click this plus button here, and that adds a second set of UV maps. You got diffuse UV, and then I want the badge to go on these faces here. So I just select those faces when I have regular UV map selected, and then I can just go in here, island select, put that in the center, UVs, constrain to image bound, and scale that up, and then vertex select, align, align, align. And that is, so diffuse UV, and then that is the badge UV. And that's pretty much just, that's UVs, basically. And then you want to do materials, and materials are a little bit more of, they're slightly tricky because there's a lot of like tags and stuff done in the materials. So you would do, starts with mat, your ship's name, which mine is going to be test ship, underscore, diffuse, close square bracket, underscore, SHD, which is shader, open bracket, and then ship, and that is the ship shader. And if I select everything except those, and assign that as ship shader, and then select those again, and create that one, create a new one, and then this one is mat test ship underscore badge. I think that's right. Let me double check that real quick by opening up. This is the tie interceptor. That was it doesn't need to be interceptor. Yeah, I messed that up altogether. So yeah, this is the tie interceptor model that is included in the Example Ships 2 package on the Steam Workshop that Gearbox provided, and that has a DAE file and a whole bunch of textures, and Blender won't open that DAE file directly, so you have to convert it. I had to convert it into an FBX and then import the FBX into Blender, and then it worked fine. But yeah, so I messed up a little bit because it's just test chip and test chip badge, close bracket, underscore, shader, close bracket. What am I doing? Okay. Badge, close bracket, underscore, shader, open, badge, close, and then assign that. So we got that as the badge shader, and then so if you can actually select which faces are assigned to which shader, which is handy. And there's also I'm not going to do an engine shader because I just don't want to go to that much trouble right now. So badge shader, I'm going to turn specular all the way off so that it matches the diffuse shader. So then you have to do, after doing all that, then you do assign your textures, which I guess I already have assigned. They're residually. I forgot to delete those. Okay, that's fine. So I can drop U, and that's just it's image open bracket test chip, your ship name underscore diffuse underscore FMT dext1 DXT1. I don't know what the FMT tag means, but the diffuse, that's important because it uses Hodor pulls in some stuff based off of what that image name is and matching that image name to what the actual texture is called. But this texture is no good, so I'm going to create a new, I'll just use untitled 01 will be the, so this is going to be test chip underscore diff for diffuse, and then the badge, you want to use that same texture, but in the UVs you want to use the, not the badge UV, the diffuse UV for that down here where it says map, and that's important. So then what you can do is Blender actually has, which untitled did I use for that? Yeah, Blender has some pretty useful, and they're not super duper great, they're not as good as like GIMP or whatever, GIMP or Photoshop, but it's got some pretty handy texture painting tools built into it. So you can just go to texture paint and, you know, go at it. And it lets you can paint like directly onto the ship, or you can paint in here in the UV image editor. You can switch that over to paint mode and paint just as well. And I'm actually going to do that real quick because there is a thing when you're painting directly on your model, it doesn't do margins around the UVs, and that can cause, let's actually switch you back to diffuse UV just so I'm sure, and that can cause the seams are a lot more visible on the when you actually get it in game. So I'm just going to paint that all white. That. And then, so yeah, I'm just gonna throw some quick splashes of color on here, and then I'm gonna move on to actually setting up all of the ship hierarchy and things. So let's go with It's going to be quick and dirty. Is that the canopy there? No, the canopy is kind of split across up into different islands, so we'll not worry about that. Yeah, one thing I'm also not going to be doing is the stripe textures. I'm not going to set those up. That's basically, I think it's just for the stripe textures, you just have to do computer. Yeah, it's just, you can see this is sort of like these are the actual texture file names. So like stripe is just your ship name underscore strp.tj, and then it's just a straight black and white texture, I believe. It's GIMP? No, it's an alpha texture. That's different than I was expecting. And that determines where the stripe color gets applied. But I'm not worrying about that right now. Do fill. Whoops. Okay, I don't know why fill acts differently. I mean, that's probably just a bug on Blender. But yeah, fill has slightly different behavior on when using it directly on the mesh versus in the image editor here. And then I'm gonna brush, just do some quick black lines. Oops, if I actually hit black. Oops. You can see this is a 2048 by 2048 texture, so the resolution's not super great. Don't believe I can do no. Do a quick smear out to soften that out. And I think that's good enough for demonstration purposes. So now that that's got my material set up and everything, there is converting this actually into a ship that that Hodor can use and turn into an in-game ship. And that is where the joint tools that Dragon 93 added in. So we have, when you turn on the Homeworld Toolkit add-on, that'll add in the Create tab here, it'll add these hardpoints and engines things. And so once you model your ship and you have everything set up, you can select your object, and then just right here under ship, you put in your ship name, you select what LOD you want, which will generally it'll just be LOD 0 because, according to Gearbox, the Homeworld Remastered engine doesn't actually use LODs, just because it's that performant, apparently. And then you click Convert to Ship. And what that does is that creates... I'm going to go to wireframe view real quick and deselect everything. It creates the root info node, which has a couple of empties beneath it. And one thing about that is that it creates it with UV sets 1. If you're using badges, you have to set UV sets to 2. Because that tells... What happens is that Hodor looks at all the IDs for all of the objects in the XML for the DAE file, which is what we're going to export from Blender. And that tells it how to treat certain things. So then you've got, the class multi-mesh version 512, which is what that is. Then you have root LOD 0, and child to that is your joint for the main, that contains the ship itself, and then the mesh for the ship is subbed to that. Though there is a slight thing in the joint tools, which I might actually make an adjustment to at a later date, but the joint for the object should be where we can see. We can check this by, here we go. Okay, so yeah, it is. It's just joint ship name, but then the mesh should have here, that should have underscore, oops, square brackets, underscore LOD 0 underscore tags do scar. And the thing is, and when you rename a mesh directly like this, you also have to make sure that there is, as you can see, that there are these sort of, everything's kind of hierarchy, and this is the object, and then below that is the actual mesh. And that's just a thing that Blender does, and you can see that, like, children to that are the materials that is using. Anything else? The object is the reason it's, I guess the reason it's split up this way is because this is for the modifier stack. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the modifier stack is why when I go into edit mode only this half is there, because I have a mirror modifier, which makes it symmetrical, and then I have an edge split modifier, and that's what's creating these hard edges, and those are created where I told it to. I can turn that off, and I can turn on edge angle there, and that makes, it'll do, like, calculate, I can tell it, you can tell an edge split modifier to either use, like, at a specific angle that do the split there, or you can do it only at sharp edges, or you can do a combination of both if you want. But, as I was saying, the mesh name has to be the same as the object name. And if you control-click on something here in the outliner, that puts you into rename mode. But yeah, that's just the basic, that's the ship. And then if you want weapons on your ship, which you probably do, unless you're making a probe or something, you left-click in the 3D view, moves the 3D cursor around, which is this thing here. And the 3D cursor is important because that's where objects get created at. So you can left-click and place your 3D cursor for where you want the gun to go. You can select here, you can select the parent that you want it to be, which will pretty much always be root LOD 0, unless you're, I think, if you're making turrets, that is probably a little bit different. I haven't messed around with turret creation. You set the name of your weapon, which, since we're just replacing a scout, is just going to be gun. And that's the number, because if you're going to do more than one, you actually want that number appended. And then you click weapon, and that immediately adds the weapon joint here, which is just automatic and super handy. That has position, direction, muzzle, and rest, and those are all there. But then, since we're doing this all symmetrically, what we want is the weapons to be the same on both sides. And you can either try and like move the... Actually trying to move the weapon joint around to get it exactly right on the other side. Super difficult, so don't even bother. The thing about empties is you can't do modifiers on empties. So you can just select everything. You can recenter the 3D cursor by doing Shift C on the keyboard. Recenters the 3D cursor, and also centers all the objects in view. And then here you can select your pivot point to the 3D cursor. Then select all the joints for the weapon. Shift D to duplicate, and then scale X -1, and that flips it over, and you've got it in exactly the right place. But after doing that, you then do have to go through the duplicate and rename that to Gun 1. Sorry, my voice is a little wonky. Bit of water. Make that slightly better. Okay. So I'm just going to rename these real quick. And then you want to take all of these and then apply scale. Just for reasons. I'm going to actually turn... No, these are off. Okay. So there we go. So, and that's weapons. Sorry. My throat's a little... definitely gummed up. Now, the next thing is... you're going to want the repair, salvage, and capture hardpoints. And those generally all go in the same place. So I'm going to just put 3D cursor right underneath the nose of the ship. And do repair point. And the repair point is, again, it's for objects. Actually, I'm just go to solid and just hide this guy. You can see it's got the location and all that. But since it's at the bottom of the ship, we don't want we don't want the up to be there. So what we do is we just rotate that on X 90 degrees. And that puts up here instead. And let's bring you back. And then, so that's repair, salvage. And we do the same thing with salvage with rotating on X 90 or RX 90. Yeah, press R is the shortcut key to rotate. S is the shortcut key to scale, and G is the shortcut key to move. G is for grab. And capture. And when you're in rotate mode, in fact, in any of those manipulator modes, you can then press X, Y, or Z to constrain to that specific axis. And that's all done with the 90 degrees on those repair points and stuff. So now we want an engine, and there's two ways to do engine, and I'm going to do the easier way, which is I'm just going to click. I'm going to put two engines on. So I'm going to put my 3D cursor in my little engine cones there, and do engine 1, flame div 5 because it's a fighter. I'm not sure why. Flame Divisions 5 is how it's set up for the example ships that Gearbox provided, so that's what I'm using. And then you just click add, and bang, it's right there. And that puts the engine, see it as engine nozzle 1. You back to there. I'm actually going to move that back a little bit. And one thing that's very important about this is that there is this engine shape mesh here. go into edit mode on that and triangulate that right away is my recommendation, because I frequently forget to do that, and that causes problems. So then back to recentering the 3D cursor, select everything on here, shift duplicate, SX -1, apply scale, and then that one's going to have to be renamed as Engine Burn 2. But I think all the flames, those can stay the same, but the engine shape that one needs to be updated to engine name 2. Whoops. Whoops. Yeah, I messed up. Oh. Yeah. So I super messed up there. Undo with new. Control Z to undo, per standard. Because I forgot to duplicate the engine nozzle as well. So that's all those. So now shift duplicate SX -1. There we go. And then that's engine nozzle 2. Engine burn 2. And those don't need to be renamed apparently for my own testing. 2, and then sure to rename that 2 as well. And that's engines. Easy peasy. So then, one thing that is not in the joint tools, but it only takes a second to do, is actually setting up the collision mesh. So what you want to do for that, you just want to put the 3D cursor somewhere. Shift A, empty plane axes, then rename that as root _ COL, and then just duplicate your mesh, then Alt P to clear parent for that duplicate, and that one's going to be COL _ open brackets, capital R lowercase OOT, and that's very important because that is case sensitive, and if you don't have it set up properly, then Homeworld will crash when it tries to load the ship up. So we take that, call root, and then I'm going to that root collision, Shift S, cursor to selected, call root mesh, Shift S, selection to cursor, and that's good. Then it's not quite good. Select the mesh, then the root call empty, Control P, object, and then sorry. So now that's all that's done. So now 2 of the most important steps to do are coming up just now. So go, if you have modifiers, if you're using any modifiers, apply those modifiers before you do anything else. And so that what that does is, see, now the mesh is this way. And then the next thing to do that is still super duper important is triangulate your mesh manually, which you do that by going to edit mode, press A to select all, Control T triangulates the mesh, and do that for both your visible mesh and the collision mesh. And then once that's done, select the root log 0 and the root collision nodes, rotate those on X -90. And that's important because Blender is on what is known as a Z up coordinate system, which means that for Blender, the z-axis is the up axis. But Homeworld uses a y-up coordinate system. So if you don't actually rotate your stuff properly, when it goes into Homeworld, then your ships will all be pointing straight down. So after you do that rotation, then select everything in object mode, press Ctrl A, and apply rotation and scale. And then, once that's all done, you just do, well, save your work, Ctrl S to save, File, Export, Better Collada-Homeworld. Do that, and then that's all. There are all these options here. Don't touch the options. It's all set up exactly how it needs to be by default to create your ship. To export the Collada file in a format that Hodor can understand and convert into a HOD for Homeworld Remastered. So then I'm just going to rename that, save that as Homeworld testship.dae, click export DAE, and it's done. It's good. And now I'm going to do something real quick. Pay no attention to the naming conventions of my folders. So I have Homeworld testship.dae. I'm just going to open that up real quick in Visual Studio, because Visual Studio does... Oh, bugger. I know. What did I forget to do? I know what I forgot to do. I forgot to save out the texture. So UV Image Editor. Oh, man. And since Blender is kind of dumb about that, the texture got completely annihilated. Close that back up. And go back into texture edit mode. Yep. Not all that's texture view mode. Texture paint mode. Sorry. And then that's... Yeah. I'm a dumb. So let's just do that again. Good thing I checked that in. That was not what I meant to do. That in my palette. Is it weird there? No. Whatever. Well, this is even more gross than it was before. Oops. Undo that. Alright, that's good enough, I think. I'm gonna actually gonna try something real quick that I don't think is gonna work, but it might do something neat. So clear. Do it? No, never mind. I'm not gonna do it. That's dumb. I was gonna bake a ambient occlusion map on top of it, but it doesn't work that way. So yeah, actually save out my texture this time. Image, save as image. I'm just going to overwrite that. Save that as a TGA file. Save as image. Now, save. Now export again. Better Collada. Export DAE. Reloads. There we go. So now it's got the texture on. And everything's pointed up. And if you... This is Visual Studio. You can get the Visual Studio Community Edition for free. I'd recommend it just because you never know when you might need Visual Studio. And it is kind of cool that it does let you open... You can open FBXs and Collada files in it. But don't, whatever you do, don't edit the Collada file and save it in Visual Studio. Because that, for some reason, Visual Studio, when it saves a DAE file or an FBX file, it removes all of the textures. I don't know why. I found a Microsoft help thread, and they said this isn't happening to us, but it happens to me. So don't do that. So that's confirmed to work. So now all we got to do is go to Hodor, and there is a GUI Hodor called Hodorist. I haven't used it yet, so I'm just going to go with the regular Hodor. Script equals myparams.hodor, and my parameters for Hodor are... Do I not have a folder? Yeah, I thought I had a folder open for it. Yeah, this is just the... These are some really base level crappy parameters that are not doing anything super great with them. But so you do that, do the command line. It was in the thread on the Gearbox forums for the mod in the mod forums. It was just like this was the example for a Hodor params file, and I just copy pasted it. So you run it, and you can see here it loads the DAE file. It says that, hey, it's a multi-mesh, gets that correctly, gets the shader here, and then it also compresses the texture. If I had a normal map that was named test ship underscore normal, and if I had all those, it would also compress all of those and throw them in. See, it creates the badge shader, it generates the LOD data, the collision mesh, the animation channels, and it's done. And that put that in right here, HOD, 22 meg HOD. So now I'm just going to drop that straight into the Kushan Scout, which I did by decompressing a big file. I am not going to walk you through doing that. So just drop that in, delete the original. That one isn't actually the original. This is the original Kushan Scout HOD. Rename that to kus_scout.hod. I'm going to check something in the ship file real quick. By default, the ship file will not have the second engine trail line. I had to add that in because for each engine trail that you want, it does have to be marked in the ship file. Do that, and then I'm just going to go to Homeworld Remastered real quick, and screens. You're not going to see anything for a second because it's not in. I'm going to have to switch it over to windowed mode, and then it should show up. Dash MP beta dash override big file. Bang. What? Oh. RM. So just 1 second, and then I'll get it into windowed mode, and you can see it. View, windowed, apply. Oof. Actually move it up. Yes, I want to keep these settings. Double check that OBS sees it. Good. Alright. And then you just go into player versus CPU. Start game. It's going to take a second to load. Build the scout real quick. Building it out of the carrier.
Scout complete.
Destroy enemy motherships.
Copy.
And there it is. In game, 2 engine trails. You can see the badges, they're a little distorted, but let's disconnect my camera. Never mind. Yeah, that's as close as far as I can zoom in. It's got the engine trails, it's got the texture, it's got the badges, and I'm just going to force it to attack my carrier. Got the guns.
Roger, attack withdrawn.
And stop. And that's pretty much it. And that's the super basic ship creation. Once I figure out more advanced ship creation, I will maybe try to do a advanced ship creation tutorial. Oh, there is one thing. I forgot about this. Blender has a 63 character limit on object names. And now there are some things like nav lights where all of the parameters will go longer than 63 characters. If I potentially can go above that limit. I have it on good authority that there is an update coming to Hodor where for things that could have really long parameters, like nav lights, I will actually pull up a nav light to show you what I'm talking about as far as the parameters being super duper long. The recent thing. Okay, this is the Kadeshi Swarmer. But you can see here the nav light, says that it's a nav light, says which nav light it is, says how big it is. I don't know what the PH and FR are. Tags mean. You have the color, which is the RGB values. Then you have dist, which I guess is some sort of LOD-esque thing that tells you how close you have to be to see it. And then it gets cut off. And it's supposed to be flags sprite, but there's not enough room for it. From what I have been told, there's an update coming where you'll be able to do something where it'll be like, for when it's super long like that, it would be like, you would have nav light 1, and then a child empty to that. It would be named params or something like parameters, and then child empties for that, for like you would have one that would be size 1.3, one for color, one for, so all of those would just be children empties of the primary nav empty. But that is not yet implemented as far as I know, and so I don't know exactly how it works. But other than that, Blender can do, as you can see, Blender can do pretty much all you want for actually making stuff. It even does animations. I'm going to save this real quick, but open recent. I'm going to show just the tie interceptor. It does actually have timeline. There you are. You can see as I scroll through the timeline, the animations for the tie interceptor they import into Blender properly, and I have tested the export, and they export properly, and that's all. Though animations are all done as children of root LOD 0, you get the hold anim thing, and then you have each of the different animations, and there's a bunch of flags in there. And I guess that's another thing, another parameter where you could probably end up going above the 63 character limit, because it has that has flags for the animation. It says like how many seconds in it starts, how many seconds in it ends. I don't know what LS and LE are, but yeah, that if you have some long animation or something. I suppose that might do a thing. These, I don't know what these are. These are mark empties. Or mark geometry. And I don't know what it's for. But anyway, this has been, whoops, oh yeah, alright, that's the crash course. Hopefully this is handy. If anybody's got any questions or knows how things work that I don't know how they work, hit me up in the comments or on Gearbox forums or whatever. And happy modding and blending and making ships and other cool stuff. And goodbye.